Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life.
Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing gifted medium and psychic Phyllis Okon, who will be speaking to us from Syosset, New York. Phyllis was a teacher, a CEO, and a best-selling award-winning author of 72 books before she found her path as a gifted medium and psychic. From an early age, she acknowledged that she knew things, but she could never explain how she did. When her husband, David, her lifelong partner and soulmate, transitioned to the other side, she began taking courses in the hope of communicating with him, studying with many well-known leaders in mediumship, including the accomplished celebrity medium Thomas John, who certified Phyllis and her many gifts through his mentorship program. Not only was Phyllis able to validate that her relationship with her husband, David, had not ended, but he also began to serve as her guide, helping her connect with others' loved ones. Much like the relationship I now have with my husband, Saul, David was Phyllis's helpmate in life and is still her helpmate, albeit now from the other side. I'm looking forward to talking with Phyllis about her experiences knowing things from an early age, her relationship with her husband, David, both before and after he transitioned. Her new book, she has two new books titled Mediumship Made Easy, A Guide to Connect with Your Intuitive Self, and her other book is Expanding Mediumship, Exploring the Ways the Universe is Communicating, and much more for what is surely going to be an enlightening, insightful, and loving interview with Phyllis. And full disclosure, I recently had a remarkable session with Phyllis that was filled with illuminating messages from deceased loved ones, pertinent healing information, and very wise guidance. Hey, Phyllis, a heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. And isn't a reading just like a reunion?
Yes, it is. I never thought of it that way, but you're right.
It is. I think of each reading as a reunion.
You're right about that. Because every time that you communicate with a medium, with your deceased loved one, you are coming back together.
To me, that's why I always sought out readings, because for me, it was like a joyous reunion when I would connect with the person on the other side. So when I do a reading, that's kind of the way I go. I'm just a telephone booth, kind of bringing spirit in and validating that it's them, and then watching the reactions of joy and contentment and just love. It's really moving when
it's really amazing. And not only that, but I also have witnessed so many times how mediumship is also an opportunity for people to heal.
Absolutely.
I mean, through our session, I can be honest and say my estranged father came through with such a life-changing message for me. And it enabled me to drop a lot of old baggage that I've been carrying around and move forward in my life away from the story. My story is now that was my story.
Right.
It's no longer my story.
What a relief.
It feels fabulous.
It does. But not only that, there's an understanding of why these things happen. That's the biggest question, is why. Well, I don't care what language a reading is in. I don't care where the people are from. very often it's, why did you do that, or why did you go, or why did this happen to me? And when the clouds clear and they get that validation or they get that message, it just kind of, for me, it's kind of like everything kind of settles into place. It's a great relief.
It is for me, I have to say, not only did I get my why, but it is amazing to know that they are with you. And as you heal in your life, you are also, they are watching that, and they are also, it helps to facilitate their healing on the other side, which
Absolutely.
is incredible. I mean, if we can accept the fact that they are all around us
Hmm.
and they are witnessing what's going on, and they are, once they get to the other side, they've had their life review and they understand things in a different way, then they become your best advocates and friends, and they really want to help you in any way they can and shed light on whatever happened. And it often comes through. I've seen so many times where they come through with apologies or new insights about what happened. You know,
Well, they see it from a different lens also. In other words, there may have been a huge fight before they left because they were sure that they were right and you were sure that you were right, and it's almost like two stones meeting together, two walls knocking together. When the biggest thing that I see is that they come and say, why did I allow that to come between us? It was such a stupid argument, and in the end, does it really matter? I wrote an article about it on Medium somewhere, where is being right worth sacrificing a relationship? Like, how much is being right worth? Sometimes it doesn't pay to be right. It's more important to maintain that relationship.
not only that, but if you, and I've had this experience where I was at a gallery once, this was years ago, and this young woman walked in and she was hysterical crying in the front of the gallery. The medium and I we'd never even been in that town before. We did not know we were invited there. We did not know anyone at the gallery. And as we walked, the medium walked to the front of the room, she said to this young woman, I feel a father figure here, and he's coming through, and he is so sorry for the argument and the things you said to each other the night before he unexpectedly died. So
Right,
this kid was hysterical because
right.
her father died and she'd said all these awful things to him and vice versa. And that was what she was living with. When the difference between this young woman at the beginning of that gallery and at the end, when she had found peace and reconciled with her father, and that was no longer an issue. So I say to people all the time, be conscious about what you say in this lifetime. You don't know if what that mean thing you just said is the last thing that person's ever going to hear from you.
Well, that is true. That is true. But also, a lot of times in a reading, it'll come through that people feel that they weren't there in the end, or they didn't say what they had to say. They didn't make and the message invariably comes through that don't base our entire life on that one last day. And this message comes through so many times that a parent will implore with a child, do not base our entire lifetime of relationship on that you feel that you disappointed me because you weren't there to hold my hand, or you weren't there, or you didn't know I passed, or whatever. That was just the smallest part of my life, you
Right.
know being the departed soul, that there would remember the good times.
Well,
Remember
they have a universal vantage point now, as opposed to our
our point of view.
our point of view, which is so small and
Right.
drama filled, and we don't see the full picture. Now they see the full picture.
Right, absolutely.
you know. So let's introduce everybody, now that they know how fabulous you are, let's introduce everybody to how in the world at an early age did you just know things? How old were you when this started happening to you? And can you give us a few examples of little Phyllis just knowing things that were going on, being born with this gift?
Well, I always had a feeling. It was funny. I would know who was going to call before the phone rang, and this went into business as well. I would go to people I worked with in the limo company and say, "Have you heard from so and so?" And all of a sudden, the phone would ring, and it would be them. I also felt things like the night before my grandmother died. I kind of knew something was going to happen. We put that down to, your my brothers would say you're nuts, or you're looking for things, but that's really your spirit guide speaking to you. That's your gut. telling you. I knew the minute my father died, we were walking out of an airport, and I had stayed upstairs with my sons. They were getting an autograph. We were coming back from Las Vegas. And all of a sudden, I said to them, "We have to go." And I opened a door and I looked down the door, and it was just a stairway, and it was very dark. And I said, "My father just died." Of course, my son said, he was a teenager. He said, "You're crazy. You're always saying crazy things like that." And I started to run. And by the time I got to the gate, the driver said, "Something happened to your father." And he was gone. I touched his hand and I knew he was gone. So my entire life, I would also instinctively know what to do about things, and I never put it down. I thought I was smart. Maybe I wasn't so smart. Maybe it was spirit kind of guiding me.
I
I
would say you were blessed because you were able to tune into your guidance.
I've always been sensitive, but I think everybody's sensitive. When you were a little kid and you said there's a monster in the closet, and your parents said, "No, no, no, there's not. That's your imagination." Well, there wasn't a monster in the closet, but there was something there. We do see things. I see it with my own grandchildren, but we nurture it. My grandkids will come and tell me they've seen, their grandfather. They know when he's in the room. We talk about
Wow.
chakras. We encourage them to have dreams. We actually talk about it all the time. And they talk about it. So we're hoping that they don't lose that innocent connection that we all do lose. But there's no special gifts. As I want to say for the record, there's no special gifts. Everybody's intuitive. We shut it off. In the same way, it's the same thing that when you're a mom and you have two kids in the house and they're fighting and you don't even hear it, it's the same. We tune things out. Or you go to the refrigerator and you're going to get the ketchup and you're looking right at the ketchup, but you don't see it because we've tuned it out. It's the same thing. We tune out the messages, we tune out spirit.
So
Because
part of all of this is to have everybody kind of fine tune their antennas and to open up.
do you remember the days with the rabbit ears?
Do I ever?
That's a lot of what I do in my course, is try to teach people to catch the signal. The signals are there, and it's a matter of um of stretching your intuitive muscles. it's
Which
it,
sometimes takes development,
it does, because you
just
have to.
like anything else.
Right, it's like you can't tap dance right away. You're not going to do a jelly roll right away. You've got to build up to it. You're
Right.
not going to lift 50-pound weights. You lift weights, you have to start with a 10-pound weight or a 5-pound weight.
Correct.
So there's a process to relearning how to connect. But a lot of people are there and they don't even realize they've got the clairs hitting them, all the different clairs, and they don't even realize it. They
Right.
they
Well, I think a lot of them get a lot of people get the messages that this is a no-no, or what is this, or they're very, until something happens that opens them to the people listening to the podcast. I mean, they are very much opening to
right.
this world and the messages, which is wonderful. But a lot of people are not there.
Mhm.
So, you want to tell us? I'm sure this is probably one of your favorite subjects. Tell us about your personal work relationship with David, which opened you to all of this, and describe your journey with him through his illness to when he transitioned. So, this was your awakening time in a way, right?
Well, we were always one thing I loved about David is that he was just open to learning about everything. I met him when I was 16, he was 22, and I went to school. I graduated college. I did college in 3 years because I knew I wanted to marry him. He owned a gas station. He left the gas station and he bought a car. He bought Jacob Javits' old limo in New York, the senator from New York. We borrowed $1,200 from my kid brother, and he started a business, and we knew nothing. I mean, my father was horrified. Who used limos? Like he said, we drive each other to the airport. We don't use car service. Who would use a limo? But David was really an open-minded person. He started out in Poland. In 57, he got out of Poland. They moved to Israel. In 67, he was wounded, and they sent him to. He was the only child. They sent him to America with $200, and he didn't speak a word of English. So he really, in the beginning, it was pretty easy to argue with him because he couldn't respond back. So I won. So, we got married when I was 22, and I was a teacher. I was a social studies teacher. And he said to me, "Look, I can't be out all day and run the back office. Would you run the back office?" So I said, "Yes, if we start a family, I would do that." So I quit teaching. I was only subbing. At that point, there weren't teaching jobs around in the 70s. So I went in and I started running the back office. I knew nothing about the business. I would call other companies and I would ask questions and turn around. It was baby steps. We went into the wedding business, and then another company from LA needed somebody to be their New York operator. We became the New York operator within 5 years. They went out of business. So we were asked to go to LA and open up. And before you knew it, we were doing a lot of jobs,
Good business.
good business. For We were working primarily with movie studios, and that's who uses limos. Let's face it, there are press tours, there are junkets, there are movie premieres, and that took a lot of intuitive insight to keep calling, to know what to ask. I would be on the phone and I would feel what someone needed to. I was the salesperson. It took a lot of intuition. You don't realize how much you use intuition. I
But
would say
what's impressing me is that people were willing to share. They didn't feel like you were trying to take something away from them. They were willing to share the knowledge that they had with you.
absolutely, because I gave back whichever way I could. I listened to their problems. I helped where I could. It was never about the money. It was never about the money. The money was just enough to live, but it was about learning how to do something. And before you knew it, we had a pretty big operation with a lot of cars. And then our sons came into the business, and then we opened in Vegas, and we bought our buildings, and we were really building it into a huge business. My mother was controller, my husband was the CEO. I was the chief cook and bottle washer. I kind of held it together behind the scenes.
You were the
My
glue. You were the
I
glue.
I was the glue. My brother worked there along with about 500 other people. It was, pretty big.
Wow.
And then within 3 months, my mother and my husband both got lung cancer. So my mother got it first. Well, first my father passed. I told you that story. It was really hard when he died. The family sort of disintegrated. My brothers, it was a sudden passing, and everybody just didn't know how to deal with the grief. We unraveled, and nobody went to counseling. We had no prior experience. We did go to mediums. We had been going to mediums for years and years and years. Somebody within the business, the community, contacted me and said someone from the other side is trying to contact you. We went to George Anderson, and it was one of those experiences that we went in one way and we left another. I went with my parents and David, and his father was trying to get through. My father made contact. It was an astonishing, and subsequently we started to go to mediums, and our viewpoint changed. So when we lost my father, right away we started running to go to me, and we couldn't get an appointment. Took a full year, a year to the day he passed. Within 5 years, they both got cancer, and my world was rocked, and I
Wow.
I was taking care of both of them, and it was really
Well,
hard. So
talk
I
about being the glue. You're
Yeah,
running a business and you're taking care of all of that.
right.
Wow.
It was incredibly difficult. We knew that my mom was terminal from the start. It was in her brain. We had no idea whether David was going to live or die. And it was really hard because he went from going 110 miles an hour to 5 miles an hour. And for a person that we were a power couple, we had friendships, we traveled all over the world. We went to like a crawl, and he went into a depression and was miserable. And unfortunately, he took it out on me. And I stepped in because I'd rather he took it out on me than my kids or my brothers or our employees or whoever it was. I didn't want anyone else to suffer. I mean, what in goodness and in health and better, whatever it is, that's what we sign up for.
And I'll
So
bet you too. I'll bet he's reconciled with you about that.
absolutely, absolutely. So what
And why
happened?
do you say that grief is not a one size fits all? Did you grieve each one of them in a different way? How do you say
I'm
that?
When my father died, I found I couldn't read. My phone's ringing. I'm just ignoring it. When my father passed, I couldn't read. I'm an avid reader. I didn't know how to deal with the grief. It was really hard. When my mom died, I went into it. She was my best friend, and I I couldn't read. I couldn't. I was a terrible time. So what had happened was, my kids came to me and said, "Mom, write a book, write a book, write a book." So I wrote a series called Captain No Beard. We got it. They helped me publish it, and that started the writing career. And it sort of filled in that void. I used to go to the ballet with my mother. She was my sounding board. We'd read together. We were buddies. And when that happened, I needed something to fill that spot. Also, my life had disintegrated where he couldn't go anywhere. So I was home. So I had to find things to do. So I started editing my son's books and I started promoting them. So it opens up. They call me the mother of reinvention. I just keep reinventing myself.
But that's so wonderful, and that we have in common also, because I'm very much like that also.
You have to be, because if you don't reinvent, you stagnate. So the grief with my mother, what happened was born this whole writing career at 58. But he was a remarkable guy, my husband. He went to death's door several times, and we lived with that sword of Damocles over our
Well,
heads.
look at what he came through just to come to this country
He
from
did.
Israel, not speaking the language and all of that. That's amazing.
He was a tough guy, and eventually he passed. And even though I was prepared for it, I wasn't prepared for it. I don't care how prepared you are. It's the silence in the house
Yeah,
was devastating.
yeah,
The
I can relate.
the Sundays when you sit in the house, when you know everybody's partnered up, you'd see a pair of geese that mated for life, and it's like where's your mate? And I
And
went.
your friendships change too.
My
I
friends,
found that too.
that does happen to a lot of people. That happened to us in the beginning. When he first got sick, he divested all his friends because he was so angry that he narrowed his world that to just him and myself. And that was very hard. So I grieved. You talk about grief. I grieved that lifestyle. I grieved my father. I grieved losing my mother. I grieved the destruction and his lack of happiness. I could not make him happy. I learned a lot that, you have to make yourself happy, that no matter if I would have danced through, it still wouldn't have changed. He was unhappy with what happened to him. That's where that why came up. Why me?
Right. Do you think that if he had, I mean, he had been to mediums, he knew that that he was gonna go on, or do you think he wasn't totally convinced in that? Because I think that the knowing that you will go on in some way is a comforting.
We talked about it, and he says, I've been to the best and I do believe, but just in case, hey, there's always that sliver of doubt. And so we set up a message, and he delivered the message 2 weeks after he
Can
passed.
you tell me what that message was?
Well, I had made an appointment with George Anderson, and George is a formal kind of guy. He does not remember people from reading to reading,
Oh, I've
as
read his books and everything, so I know. Yeah, right.
and so he said, "I'm going to say hi, Georgie, and you're going to get that message." So George was sitting and reading, and all of a sudden he goes, "What? Does this guy know me?" He says, "Because he's saying hi, Georgie," which is exactly what my husband did. He like did a little toodaloo with his fingers and said, "Hi, Georgie."
That's wonderful.
And so I knew, but listen, every time I give a reading and I hit it out of the park, when I get something that's so evidential, it's I'm getting the satisfaction of knowing, yes, it is true. They really are.
Even with all you know, it's still with me, with I this podcast, all the people I interview, it's still a wonderful validation.
That's exactly
Every time something hits home, I go, yes, yes, yes.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. We get that validation. It is true. How could she have known that? I got and sometimes you don't get exactly the message you want. People have to understand it's interpretive. We don't get a written document. They're using our memories, our library of images, and we get a flash, a quick image, or a smell, or whatever it is, and that's it. And a good medium just reports. Jack Webb from Dragnet, just the
Right.
facts, ma'am.
Just effects, ma'am.
That's what a good medium does. I have a picture that my son took in London of me in a British phone booth. And I put that on because that's what I feel I am the conduit.
We're the conduit. When you say that we know that loss is a hard road and it should never be walked alone, you were walking it alone a little bit.
It was funny. What is it? The shoemaker goes, kids
Right,
go.
right. So,
We made my mom go for therapy when we lost my dad. She was inconsolable. And, even though I thought I was prepared for my mom, of course, I went and the books kind of pulled me out. When David went, like I said, even though I felt I was prepared, and I mean, for 15 years, I had been told every time I went to the hospital, this is it. He's not going to come out. And then he would come out. The doctors called him the ever ready bunny. George Anderson called him the ever ready bunny. Like he would just keep going. He had a heart attack. He wheeled himself into the hospital because he was very independent. He wheeled himself in. We thought it was his lungs. It was his heart. They took him in for an angiogram and they said his heart's a mess from all the radiation. He's inoperable. Take him home. And he went and he lost 100 pounds. He got 6 more years. He was very motivated to stay. He was willing to do what he had to do to stay.
wow.
But what happened was when he passed, I didn't go for help. And I was at a function for my 5-year-old, my grandson. And my son was taking pictures. And so he took the pictures. He says, Mom, come here. Look at the pictures. And I go and I look and he says, do you see what I see? And I said, yes. And what I saw was somebody who was very sad. And I didn't realize, because we don't see our own faces. We don't see. I was going through the motions. I was working. I was traveling. I was doing what I had to do. But I was and I never have depression. I can bounce up. I can bounce back. I can deal with it. And so I started bereavement group. I signed up that week for bereavement group. It was the best thing I ever did. Because I thought, oh, what are they going to tell? I know everything, but I didn't.
But
And
that's the part of it that you never stop learning. If you're open, you never stop. You never stop growing if you're open to that.
well, it was also sitting in a room and not saying anything because everybody knew how the other person felt. Which, the hardest thing of grief I've had to deal with is people looking at me and saying, you're not over it yet, or you're still on that. Like, what the hell, guys? There's no timeline for grief. Everybody, I would think I'm fine. And then I went to the supermarket and walking down and seeing the gefilte fish would like reduce me to a puddle. Not that I would buy it for myself, but I bought it for him. See the sardines and pick them up and say, no, I don't need them anymore. It's just me. Or walking in the house and just feeling I don't even want to eat because
I can so relate to every single thing you're saying.
I never watched TV. I read. I was a reader. I cannot sit in this house without the TV on because I have to feel that there's noise. I put music or the TV because the silence just kind of becomes a blanket, and I'm almost 6 years out.
Yeah. No, I to this day, there's times I miss salt. There are certain things, there are certain triggers, there are certain ways. And then there are times that I say, oh, he's coming into my head. A song will pop into my head or something will go on. I often tell people on this podcast that the most poignant thing that happened to me was when they pulled me out of the car, aside from the fact that I got a message from the other side that said, be loving and kind to everyone, which was amazing in itself. On the earthbound plane, I said to myself, I will get through this somehow because I have to show my son that you can get hit by a grenade in life and keep on going. Saul was buried on my son's 21st birthday. And 4 years after the accident, Matt said to me, Mom, there's been nothing worse than seeing you in total despair and nothing better than seeing you be able to have joy again. Right. And that's what I tell people. It's really hard, but get your healing or do whatever you need to do. You will continue to grieve in your way, but to move through it, because even for those in your life, your children, they need, just like your son showed you your picture. That affected him. How sad. He
Right.
wanted you to be able to have joy again, to continue to share in his life,
Mhm.
right? So,
Absolutely.
it's people, I think, are starting to get that more and more today. I hope.
Well, there's more choice. And I went to 2 different bereavement groups. I went to one that was a group of widows. To this day, we're still friends. We meet every once in a while. We go out. We call each other around our trigger days, death anniversaries, birthdays. We call each other holidays. We're all reaching out, saying, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" So that was one group, and the other group I went to analyzed bereavement, which I actually got a lot out of because I saw the stages of grief, that there's an actual process, that it is a process. And once I understood that, oh, this is what I'm feeling, and this identifies as number 6, and everybody has, I'm not unusual, and I'm stuck here. What can I do to get out of it? What can I do to break the cycle? And it really helped a lot. And
Of
I
course it
urge
did.
people I urge people to go for grief counseling.
Yeah, or some kind of or healing or therapy or something. And also, I wanted to ask you, you got a special message that prepares you for David's transition during your session with the medium. What was that all about?
Like I said, I've gone to mediums,
So, what did
and
they say to you that told you he was going to go?
I had been to him several times, and
Was
he
this
would
George Anderson?
it happens to be George, and he would look at me and say, it could go this way, it could go that way, and I just had a feeling of hope that he was going to make it out. Well, I went to him and he looked up at me and he didn't say anything, but I knew him at this point. I could read him, and I knew he saw something and he didn't say it. And I said to him, I stood up and I said, "What did you see?" And he shook his head. And I said, "Did you see me?" Because what he had seen me in other times for other members of my family was widow weeds. He would see black, or he would see a certain saint behind you. I don't know which saint, and he said, "Yes, I saw it." And I said, "When?" And he said, "It's going to be within 2 years."
Wow.
And I said, you know, "Okay." I took it with a grain of salt because we had gone so many, and your life is not predetermined. There is freedom of choice. We do have choice. As David showed, all those times he was going in a certain direction and then he would do something to heal himself. So I said, "Okay." And it was 2 years later. It was midnight. It was a quarter to 12. And I looked at the clock. I went up to bed. David would sleep on the couch. He couldn't do the steps because he couldn't do the breathing. His lung tissue had really diminished. And I said, "Oh, it's a quarter to 12." George was wrong. He missed it. We're getting through the 2 years. And don't you know, as soon as I put my head on that pillow, I heard my husband call out. He screams. He said, "Come down." And he was in the middle of having a seizure. And we raced him to the hospital. And the year before, we were in Vegas and he had a seizure. And they asked me, "What do I do?" And they wanted to intubate him. I said, "Go ahead." And they intubated him, and it was one of those life and death things where they said, if he can't get off the intubation, we're just going to let him go. And he got off and he healed himself. He recuperated. um, but he was furious with me. He said, "Don't you ever do that to me again. If I'm in that position, I want to be let go." I said, "Okay." He didn't speak to me for 2 months. He was so angry at me that I did the intubation. I said, "Okay." So they came to me and they said, "We have to intubate." And I said, "I can't tell you to do that." He told me his wishes are not to. And they said, "He's going to go." And I said, I have to honor his wishes. I knew that he's never going to get better. And they went into him and he allowed them to intubate him. So he lived an additional 32 days of sheer misery. And he finally ended up hemorrhaging to death because the intubation ripped his lungs.
Wow.
And it was a brutal end that really scarred me, until I
You
went.
felt responsible until you worked that through with them, probably, right?
I felt terrible because I had tried to tell him. I knew he was having 30 to 40 seizures a day. So the cancer had come back and was probably in his brain at that point, because my mother had the same kind of seizures. So I knew that there was not he had no lung tissue left. He couldn't get off the intubation. And I said to him, let yourself go peacefully. But he was sort of not in his right mind. And the hospital administration came in and talked him into staying on the machines. And I said, do what you think is, whatever you want. I'm here. I will rehabilitate. He couldn't move. He had strokes. He was a
But he
mess.
still wanted to go. He still wanted to stay, rather.
Wanted us to be. That's the human spirit. My
Yeah.
mother was in the final stages of her cancer. She had signed all these DNRs and she was throwing off blood clots. We raced into the city. We were all there, my brothers and I, and the doctor came out and he started to laugh. He says, your mother is completely riddled with cancer. You know that she's very close. And he says, she wants her DNA removed. We said, what? DNR removed. We said, whatever mom wants, mom gets. She died a week later. It didn't matter. But I guess in the end, the human spirit is, I want to stay. Till they go
Right.
there, and my husband has told me that he had the most joyous reunion. He could not believe it. And my theory is that all of us are there too. That there's just a piece of us
Oh,
here.
that's absolutely true. I've learned that from a lot of people.
Yeah, that's my
I can attest to when my mother passed, just coincidentally, coincidentally, I happened to have made an appointment with a medium about 3 months before my mother passed. The session was an hour and a half after my mother passed. Just coincidentally, she immediately told me there was a big party for her on the other side. She
right.
described my maternal grandfather who came and brought her over and all of that kind of thing. And it's such a comfort. And again, such a validation.
It is. It is. And he's come through Thomas John and Kim Russo. He's come through Gary Joseph. He's come through so many mediums, and the message is always the same. It's not bad, you know.
No. So with all of those mediums he's come through, what inspired you to take courses to become a medium instead of continue to go on to mediums?
Well, when he passed, I started running to mediums as much as I could, to all different ones, hoping that the message was going to be different. Richard Knight, you name it. I went, Jake the Compassionate. I mean, I went to anyone who somebody would send me an email. I was signed on. I wanted to hear from him, and I did. I heard from him. So I went to a Ronald McDonald function where they were collecting money for Ronald McDonald House, and you paid, I don't know, $30, and for each medium, they were like a group of mediums. So I paid for 3 different mediums, and each medium said to me, you should be doing this. The last one, about a week before that, by the way, I went to Glenn Dove. He was on Long Island in Glen Cove, I think. No, or he was on the South Shore, and he subsequently has moved to Florida. And he said, my father came through and said, not only was I going to become a medium, but I was going to become very good. And I laughed. I didn't pay attention. The following week, I went, and the 3 mediums all said that I could be doing this myself. And yeah, sure, okay. But the last one, Edward Pierce, said to me, I'm going to teach you. You need to learn, and I'm going to teach you. And so every Friday we would go on FaceTime, and he started to teach me. And
Was this during COVID time?
not yet.
Not yet.
I was sort of getting things. He had certain lesson plans. We did pictures, remote viewing. I read him. And then COVID happened, and my business unraveled. We lost everything. And I was in the house trying to keep the reins of everything together. But the one thing I had was a lot of free time. So I started booking courses. And a lot of mediums went, by Zoom. And it was keeping me busy. I was going from course to course to course. And I became
And you could see that your skills were getting better.
Each course reinforced what the other course was teaching me. And then I started to see that I was missing signs, that I was getting them or getting the messages. I just wasn't acknowledging them.
Like such as?
Like whatever it was, like seeing something, a collection of numbers, a song coming on, hearing a message, smelling something. It was like we dialed up, and it became apparent that, and not only I did it, but my sons and my daughter-in-laws also took the course. And we all kind of got immersed in this whole thing.
How cool. It was
Yeah,
became a family project.
it
That's
did.
fabulous.
Like I said, my grandkids are involved. They know all about it, and they don't shy away from it. It's
I think
nice.
that's wonderful. Would you please educate people as to what's the difference between a psychic and a medium? And
Okay,
are all mediums psychic? And so during a reading, do you also transmit psychic information? Like educate everyone about what that's all about.
okay, all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. Okay. And that took me a long time to understand the difference. I never quite understood the difference when I would go for reading, and that this was psychic and this was a me. I just couldn't understand the difference. A medium connects directly to a beloved person, a departed person on the other side. A medium will get you some kind of evidence, a good medium will get you some kind of evidential proof that they are indeed speaking to your loved one. And what I mean by proof is something that nobody else knew, like your father had smelly feet, or that there was a huge fight before he passed, or whatever it is, but something that wouldn't be general knowledge.
I was in a gallery once when the medium said to somebody, I'm seeing a man behind you picking his nose. And
Right.
her father picked his nose.
That's evidential proof that, everybody, I see your father, he loves you. Yeah, that's, sure. Okay. But when he says, I see your father, and he's picking his nose, or he's saying zippity doo, whatever it is,
Whatever it is. Yep.
that identifies. First you identify, you give evidence, and then you find the message, you deliver the message. Psychics plug into the universe, or to whatever it is, and they look at the past, the present, the future. They give you information about those things, but they're not speaking to your loved one. They're speaking to the universe at large, giving you information that generally nobody else would know.
So when George Anderson got the message that it was 2 years away or whatever that was a psychic message.
That was a psychic message, but he could have been getting it from one of my parents that, like, said, prepare her. It's going to be within 2 years. There's a real difference when you get a psychic message would be, I'll get a picture, I'll get an image of choppy water, and all of a sudden I'll say, are you having a difficulty at work? And are you looking to change your job, or whatever, like, for whatever reason, that's my image for it. That's a psychic message. But other times I'll get a message like, your mom says watch out for the girl you sit next to. That's, even though it's sort of a psychic message, it's coming from her mother.
Right, right, right.
So that's the difference between the two.
So that's interesting to know that the psychic information is a universal, not a universal field, that as opposed to an individual who's transitioned. And we also have choice, so we can get a psychic message, but with choice, we may not. It may not happen.
Right.
Depends on. I mean, I think they read the potential of something. Would you agree with that?
We have freedom of choice, freedom of will, and we can change anything. We have choice. That is true. Just to give an example, I was at a meeting and I asked the girl next to me if she had lost a dog recently. And this was not a mediumship meeting, this was a work meeting. And she said, yeah, she did. And I said, but you also lost your mom. And she teared up. I said, do you want me to stop? And she said, no. And I could tell she was not a believer. This was someone who was not especially a believer. And I went on to talk about her mom, and that she was struggling with the fact that she wasn't there. She was on her way when her mom died, and her mom wanted her to let go of that. And her mom gave her a message saying something like, whatever she did, she was making the right decision. I had no idea what she was talking about. I don't know. But she said, I understand that. I named her nephew and I named her brother. So she got other validations. And when I was leaving, I said, is there someone that had a problem with their stomach? She goes, nope, nope. And I could see she closed. She just closed up. That was a psychic message. I said, I'm just, what happens is I see a certain area light up. I said, was somebody having a digestive issue, living or dead? I don't know. She goes, nope, 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 nope. I left the meeting. I had to go to another meeting, but we were coming back afterwards to say goodbye to someone else there. And I walked in. She said, oh my God. Oh my God, you got to stay and hear this. She said, I was writing my boyfriend what you said. And all of a sudden he wrote back, I can't talk to you. I'm on the way to the hospital. My mother has food poisoning. So,
Wow.
but I felt, is that psychic or is that coming from her mom? I felt like her mom kind of said, mentioned she's aware that someone's having a stomach issue, but it is sort of like, that's the difference. Do you know?
Right. Is she still such a skeptic? That's what I want to know.
That tipped her over. That was the tipping point, you know?
Yeah, there you go. So tell me also, because we all know, everyone who follows this podcast knows that Saul is working with me on the other side. I say that this podcast that's helping so many people is on Wings of Angels, and he's stirring that pot. How is David helping you? Because he not only serves as your guide, but he helps you connect with others loved ones. So how did that all happen?
David and I
Uh,
were always partners in everything we did. When I read the books, he told me, he encouraged me. When I wrote the books, he encouraged me to I mean, it was expensive hobby. He always encouraged me, he was a wonderful support system. You hear the song The Wind Beneath Your Wings. He was my wind beneath my wings. I was his. He would say, go for it, go for it. He was never afraid of anything. So when he came through assorted mediums, they would all be astonished. They would all be astonished, and they would say, I've done 1,000 readings, and I've never had a reading with business information where the departed was giving business advice. I compare us to the four wheels. My two sons and my husband and myself, we are the wheels of the car. And for instance, throughout COVID, he directed us on. He never said the word COVID, but he did indicate we were going to have rocky road. It was not going to be easy, but whatever was going to happen to us was happening worldwide, and we sort of knew it. He gave us an end date. We sort of had an idea throughout COVID, so we've always worked together. So when I started to do this, I right away asked him to help me facilitate it. And when I get ready for a reading, which I don't meditate, I don't do any of that, but sometimes I do um, kind of just take a moment. I align my chakras, and then I say to him, "Come on, we're going to do this together, right?" And I just feel him just roll right in, and just like he helped me with everything while he was here, he's helping me with this.
that's beautiful. That is fascinating. You do not meditate?
I don't meditate. No, not at
That's
all.
fantastic. That's amazing. Because someone else would say, "What?" Because
No,
everybody talks about meditation.
I don't meditate. I'm multitasking all day long. I've got in the morning I'm doing business. I'm in the office at 7 a.m. running the business. We travel 2 or 3 times a month. I'm all over the world. I go everywhere. I have at this point over 700 employees.
Wow.
There's a lot going on. I have books. I promote the books. I do articles. I write on Medium. Medium is
You're
a
not bored.
I'm not bored at all. So I don't have time. And for me, when I read a person, it's a matter of focusing on it, tuning it out or tuning it on. I don't need to get ready. I don't have to put aluminum foil on my head. It just
Just happens.
a matter of just opening the
Tuning
chat.
in. So tell me, you've got a great story about after your husband transitioned, you got lost. I got to tell you, I would have the same story. I have no GPS in my head at all. I think that I love that story. So how did he help you find your way?
That was really a turning point when I realized he was, if you ask, they will. And that's what people don't understand. If you ask, they will answer you.
How long was he on the other side when this happened?
Long. It was, maybe 6 weeks. And we live on Long Island, and I know the North Shore pretty well, but I don't know the South Shore well at all. And it's about 30 miles apart. And I met my best friends, I met her on the South Shore for dinner, and it was not a neighborhood I was familiar with. We were far from on the North Shore, you're always near a highway. On the South Shore, it's like somebody designed it with pickup sticks. They threw the sticks down and they said, "Okay, that's the streets. That's what we're gonna do." So I left the restaurant, and my kids had installed Waze on my phone or Google, but whatever it was, and it went dead, and the phone went dead, and
Oh my God, how scary.
it was very scary. It was dark. I don't know my right from my left. I'm not good with that,
Isn't
and
that amazing? She can talk to the deceased, but she doesn't have any sense of direction. I'm
I
the same. I don't either.
I had no sense of where I was, and I started to panic. I was not in a great neighborhood, and all of a sudden I heard him say, "Take a deep breath and make a right." And so I said, "Okay," and I made a right.
Did it come through as a thought, or
It,
did you hear a voice?
I heard it in my inner ear, and then he directed me to the highway, and I felt him sitting in the car next to me. I could have reached out and felt I knew he was there. He directed me, he kept me calm. And if I'm telling you it was right, double, right, left, it was very convoluted, and I was basically driving in the dark, you know, and he got me onto the highway and home, and
Wow,
I never felt alone again.
that's fabulous. Fabulous. Can you describe to everyone how you get your messages? I know that we get them through our Claire senses. Could you explain to some, people who are just tuning into the podcast, how does a medium do this? Do they hear? Do they see? How could you explain how that
Well,
happens for
we
you?
get messages all different ways. Like, for instance, if you're clairtangent, you pick up an article that belongs to somebody, and you can feel their vibration. Like you see those mediums who say, "Give me their watch," and they hold the watch. I don't do that. Um, for me, I can hear it. I'll hear it. I'll see it.
So it
Uh,
comes through as in your inner voice.
Inner voice. Sometimes I hear it outside of my head. Sometimes I hear it in my inner ear.
Are these your spirit guides telling you this, you think, or a bunch of people?
I think it's my husband bringing them forward. It could be my grandmother. I have a grandmother that I never met, that through dowsing rods I determined that she also is helping me. She was very she was capable of doing these things too, but I never met her. She was killed by Nazis. And so but she has come through time and time again. I'm named for her, so I guess there's a really strong connection there. But I'll get an image in my head. I'll see something. I can sense it. I get either internally I can sense it, claircognizant, you just know. For instance, we were driving across the bridge from Mohegan Sun in Connecticut. We were driving on a Sunday afternoon, and I saw the World Trade Center, and I turned to my husband. I said, "A plane's going to hit the Trade Center." And he said, "You're crazy. You're nuts." That was always what they said to me. That Tuesday, we were driving to work, but I didn't see it as a big liner. I saw it as a little plane hitting that, because the images are whatever's in your
Right,
storage.
right.
So, I you get the goosebumps. That's external. Clairsentience, you feel it.
You
Uh,
smell things too, and taste things.
Yeah, clairgustance is tasting. Sometimes you get the taste. Sometimes you'll taste blood in your mouth, or you'll taste food. I ta-
And you get a sensation of the way they died. Like,
uh,
does that affect your body?
Sometimes I'll feel, particularly with lung cancer, I get like a tickle in my throat. That's why I always keep a drink next to me. I'll feel like my chest, it's with lung cancer or congestive heart failure with the lungs. Other times I'll just be directed to feel a part of my body. Sometimes they direct your eyes to an object on your desk. Like, for instance, I'll be looking at you, and then all of a sudden I'll feel my eyes focus on your earrings, and I'll go, "Tell me about your mom's earrings." And it's like, "Oh my God, I'm wearing them." So or my mother lost her earring. There's a story. Like, I was sitting with somebody yesterday, and I got a flash of a dozen eggs, and it was from the movie um Ghostbusters. Do you remember the movie Ghostbusters, when the
Sure.
egg popping out of the eggs were popping out, and it was just a quick flash of the eggs popping out and sizzling on the countertop. And I said, "Tell me about the eggs." And she started to laugh. And she said, my mother was getting out of the car, and the neighbor came over and dropped his drawers to show he flashed her, and she dropped the eggs all over the neighborhood. So they used, like I said, my storage of memories and let me know. I did a reading the other day. It was a galley, it was a lot of people on there. And I said, "Why is your husband showing me little Bo Peep?" And she goes, "I don't know. I don't know." I said, "Well, I see it." And he insisted. He reinforced the image. I said, "Well, he's showing me little Bo Peep again. Did he used to say that nursery rhyme? Was that a nickname? What's And she goes, I have no idea except, well, maybe." She says, "My daughter has a goat farm."
There you go.
Right.
So also, do you receive messages in languages other than English?
You know what? I do hear there are times when I'll get a name that is not an American name, and I'll just repeat what I hear. There are times when I'll hear a word. I speak a few languages, not fluently, but enough that, I know how to go to the bathroom or,
Right.
to
Well, I know you also have a wonderful story about communicating with a Polish couple's son.
yes.
You want
Yeah.
to tell us about that?
Well, I was doing a couple, and they were in Poland. I was in New York, and we were in a Zoom. And in the middle of the reading, I could feel the texture of cooked apples in my mouth. Now I'm allergic to apples, but I do remember I could feel the taste. I could smell the cinnamon cooking. I could smell the. I tasted the. I heard the crunch of the crust of the strudel, and I said to the mother, "Why am I hearing and tasting and sensing apple strudel, not apple cake, but apple strudel?" And she started to cry, and she said, "Well, that was my son's favorite. And I cooked it this morning, hoping that the smell would bring him home, that would bring him home." And it astonished me, But I was reading a couple of young ladies the other night, and I asked them, "What's up with your father's feet? They stink." And they cracked up because I could smell the odor of smelly feet. So the spirit's going to get you that message one
One
way,
way or the other.
right?
One way or the other, they're gonna get you. They're gonna get you, get you, get you. I was dating a guy, and Saul. It was a couple of years after Saul transitioned, and the guy came from England, and he came and he said, "Irene, I just bought this special cologne. I don't know what made me feel like I needed to buy this cologne to wear around you. It was my husband's cologne." I was like, "You buster!"
Yeah,
But that was the way Saul. That was Saul's sense of humor, and absolutely his way of letting me know
he was there. He
I'm
approved.
here with you, and I know what you're up to, kiddo. You
Yeah.
know, but so let's talk about. You've got two books. One is Mediumship Made Easy: A Guide to Connect with Your Intuitive Self, and the other is Expanding Mediumship: Exploring the Ways the Universe is Communicating. And you have a lot of wisdom in your books. Why don't we start by let me ask you, because you speak to the difference between spirit guides and angels. So
Okay.
people don't even know they have spirit guides or that they have angels, Phyllis. What is
Right.
that
Well,
all about?
it's really funny, but all the courses I took, they would have us meditate, which I'm not a good meditator. I don't like to meditate. And everybody was connecting with their spirit guides who always names like Sacagawea or something, like everybody had a spell. I couldn't find my spirit guide. And even if I found my spirit guide, where's the proof that what I'm seeing, hearing, or feeling is not my imagination? I need proof. Whatever I do, like for instance, that strudel, that to me is evidential. That's proof. I have no evidence. What I've learned is that we all have spirit guides. We have multiple spirit guides. Spirit guides could be your ancestor, it could be a relative, it could be a friend, it could be a mentor, it could be a stranger, it could be someone you lived with in another life, it could be someone recently, but you have multiple. You have a team, you have a whole team that's kind of watching out for you. And
And they change, right? As depending on what's going on in your life. It's
yeah,
like calling in the troops. Some spirit guides leave and others come in depending on
right.
what's going on.
Right, just like you may need a different spirit guide when you're young, you'll need a different one when you're older. But you do have a team, and spirit guides, if you ask, they will help. If you ask for a sign, they will show you a sign. So it's just a matter of confidence. I know I can fall back. You know that exercise where you fall backwards and you know somebody will catch you? I trust they're going to be there. But I'm really not sure. I know my husband is part of it. I know my grandmother. I know my parents would have to be in my spirit team. My other grandmother, I had a dream about her the other night and she let me know she was there. So the point was, it's a matter of trust that angels, spirit guides could also be ascended masters, like the greats.
Do you want to let people know what is an ascended master?
An ascended master is someone who's gone through the perils and the challenges of life. Somebody like Mother Teresa, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Moses, Mohammed. I don't care what your religion is. These people have come through the saints. They have lived and they have suffered, and they have learned from their life experiences, and they're there to help. They are there to help. So you can have all of these different kind of people around you or spirits around you, and if you ask them for help, they will help. And you may not like the help, you may not like the answer, but they will be there for you.
And they have time. I mean, a lot of people are calling on them, but they can be there whenever
Well,
you call on them.
they can only do what they can do. Sometimes people want it all done for them, but we're here to learn. We're here to have the experience. You kind of have to, sometimes you have to burn your hands on the stove. An angel has never incarnated. They're light beings, they've never lived a life. And angels, well, spirit guides belong solely to you. Angels belong to everybody. So if you need protection, you call on Archangel Michael. If you're worried about your health, you call Raziel. If it's a spiritual thing, you can ask for Jibril or Gabriel. So angels are available to everybody, and you can call on them and ask them for help. They will not interfere unless you.
Do you have a chance?
Yeah,
Go ahead. They will not
angels
interfere.
will interfere. Spirit guides won't interfere unless you ask for it.
Angels will or will not interfere.
Will interfere. For
Will
instance,
interfere.
in every case that I've read, a person that had a traumatic passing, they have always said, I was yanked out of my body before the pain. That was my number one concern with my husband, and it was verified to me. And as I read people, I see a hand reaching somebody by the back of their neck and pulling them out. That's my image for it, that I know that they were pulled out before that car hit, before they landed with the rope around them. Whatever the thing is, they make it clear that they did not suffer.
That their body was going through that, but their soul was already
Out.
on the other side,
Gone.
out. And do you ever, when you have a session, do angels ever come through to you, or you just?
I've seen them. I've seen them. There's a book by Damon Brand, The 72 Angels of Magic. During COVID, I never believed in angels. I never thought about them. I really thought it was just a figment. I didn't not believe, but I never really thought about it. But during COVID, I worked with the angels, and I have to say that they got me through. They got me through. Yeah, it's a great book, and my two sons read, the kids, everybody's involved with the angels.
You got a cool family, girl. The other thing one of your books talks about is self-doubt and fear.
Okay.
You talk about where they come from and we can conquer them. Could you share that wisdom with us?
If you want to read people, you have to get rid of the self-doubt and fear. You have to have confidence. It's all about self-esteem, that yellow solar plexus, chakra. You have to have confidence, and you can't be afraid to be wrong. So in order to, like, for instance,
that's big. You can't be afraid to be wrong. I mean, like, that's huge.
The number one lesson I learned from Eddie, my very first teacher, is park your ego at the door. You cannot be afraid to ask, because you have to learn the difference. And you may say something like, I said, little Bo Peep, and she said, no. I said, okay. He's kind of insisting I'm not going to fight with the person, but I know what I saw, but I'm not going to get upset. There are many times I'll say, do you take the name Mary? They go, no. Okay, no problem. I just tell you what I hear. I'm not afraid to be wrong. Sometimes I'll get the call later where they say, "Oh my God, I forgot about that person." It wasn't until my mother heard it, and then she said, "Oh, that was Aunt Mary." So very often you are right, but there are times when I'm getting a picture, I may not be reading it right, or a feeling. That's what happens. But you have to concentrate on your successes and your past achievements. How did you feel when you had that yes moment? You have to think in that positive vein, not where you failed. You have to also avoid triggers. If you know that something's going to trigger you, stay away from it. If you know that if you go there, you're going to sink into despair, you're going to get stuck on
You
it.
mean as the reader?
As no, to get rid of self doubt and fear. As a
Oh, okay.
just to get rid of self doubt and fear, to get rid of the fear, don't go where the trigger gets you.
Right.
You have to stop seeking approval from others. What makes you think that anyone else is smarter than you? You know, it's like I always tell my children when they go, so and so said this. I said, would you go to them for advice? They go, no. So I said, what do you care what they think then? Like, why would you even care that they said you're this or that or the other thing? Would you live their life? Would you
That's
take their
just in their headset. That's not necessarily for yours.
right? Don't compare yourself with others. This is something that I work with in my groups. I have 41 students now, and I tell them do not compare yourself, Joan, to Chris. Chris, for whatever reason, opened up. Joan has other issues, and don't judge. She'll blossom when it's her time, and embrace. This is very important. When you're reading, you kind of have to forgive yourself. You can't It can't be about you. You have to let go of all those things that you've held on to and will maybe influence a reading. So you have to forgive yourself. You have to let go of all the things. You have to
You have
stop.
to kind of be objective and more neutral,
That's
and
right.
give up your ego,
Right.
give up your issues.
That's
That's
right.
so that kind of lends itself to that expression, heal thyself.
Well, it does absolutely. And I think that it did heal me. Learning, was a lot about self-aware. When before my husband passed, I was asked to write a book about mindfulness. I didn't even know what mindfulness was. And I didn't want to write the book because I didn't feel qualified, but they wanted me and they kept upping the offer. So eventually I said yes, but I told them that the caveat was they had to hire a psychologist to write the book with me so that I wouldn't make mistakes. And when I wrote the book, I became I didn't understand what mindfulness meant. And I think that that book was put in my path because it was just another stepping stone on this journey.
It's, I totally get that. I'm sure that's true. I mean, through my journey, I've been presented with so many stepping stones, and the whole difference is you make the choice. Do I
Right.
go for it? Don't I go for it? And there's another thing one of your books talked about that I really admired. You talked about the code and responsibility of mediumship. And so tell us about that. And what else would you like us to know about your two books? You can
Well,
tell everything.
the code is you can't put yourself in there. In other words, it's really important that you can't judge other people's decision. I'm reading people that maybe didn't make choices that I think are admirable, or their politics are not your politics,
Yeah.
or maybe it's a matter of abortion and no abortion, or whatever it is. You cannot put your own social mores and codes into. You have to read people objectively. A little bit of yourself has to disappear. It's a fine line because they're using your memory and your store of memories and your collection of images. You have like a Pictionary in your head that they use, and your emotions, your experiences, but you kind of have to divorce yourself from it. You have to rise above it. So,
It's a
like
big challenge. That's a big challenge.
it is, but when you're reading, I find I lose sense of myself. Like I feel like almost as though I disappear. I remember going to a reading, the first reading, and I couldn't tell you what the medium looked like when I left because all I saw was my grandmother. And I hope that people get the same thing from me when I read for them, that they don't see me, that their loved one steps in using me.
Yeah, well, that happened to me, so I can say that. What else would you like everyone to know about your two books?
Well, my books are basically the curriculum of my two courses. Mediumship Made Easy is course number level one. It's 5 classes, and I think it's about 10 chapters, but I break it down. And it's all about a journey. What I've discovered is I wrote the books pretty much over a weekend. When I decided I was going to teach the course, I wanted people to have something physical from the class. And so I wrote the lesson plans, and then I turned it into a book so that they would have it handy and that they could use markers to mark important things or go back and reread it. Because, you could take the course and it doesn't make sense to you at a certain point, but you go back and you reread it, and all of a sudden you go, "Oh my God, now I get it." So the books are pretty much a gentle guide of my journey.
And
Without
they're ebooks, right? They're ebooks.
You can get a Kindle, you can get a paperback.
Oh, they're paperback. Okay.
Yeah, and they're I don't think they're more than 50 or 60 pages, so they're pretty easy, and it just breaks down each class how we do. The only thing they're not getting is the exercises that I do in each class, the
I
practice.
think I think reading it would help someone who's going for a mediumship reading to understand what happens.
You have to be a good sitter. You can't take over the reading. If you're going to be a sitter, don't, there's an expression, don't feed the medium. It's also a fine line. You have to open the door for the medium by saying, I take that, or I can understand that. It's never going to be exact. Like the little Bo Peep. Little Bo Peep took care of sheep. It rhymes, Bo Peep and sheep, right? But she was a herder nonetheless. So he showed me, I didn't have a picture of goats, I guess, so he showed me Bo Peep, and I think it was also an emotional thing that was his daughter, that he saw her as, this gatherer
Right.
of goats, you know. But so it's not an exact science. So somebody has to say, "Oh my God, yes, that applies to me," but then don't go into, and he also had a tattoo, and like, don't over explain. Let the medium do the work.
Right. What do you want everybody to know about your single sessions, your group sessions? We've heard about your classes for mediumship, and is everything through Zoom online? How does that all work for you, Phyllis?
I do Zooms. They're convenient. I have half-hour sessions. I have full-hour sessions. I have an hour and a half session. You can purchase an extra 15 minutes. You can have 45-minute sessions. There's all kinds of sessions. I do in-persons. They're more expensive because I have to travel. But I will travel if people want me to. I can do it in my office, or I've been to people's homes. I've been to yoga studios where they've brought in people. So those prices are upon request. We figure out what we're going to charge. But I do galleries. If you watch my Facebook and YouTube, I'll be putting out when I do galleries. Galleries, there are two different galleries. I do a gallery of 10, and everybody gets read. They're a little bit more expensive. But if I do a gallery with 30 or 40 people, maybe 5 or 8 people are going to get read. But that being said, even if you're not read, sometimes there's a message for you within the other person's reading. And I always went to those readings because I never knew if I was going to get a message inadvertently through somebody else, or for just it was good to see other people get their messages. It's validating to see someone get a message, and it just, even if you don't get that message, there's something to it. And then you have to also, that's how you pick a medium. You go to galleries, and if you like their style, that's the best way to pick a medium.
Yeah, that's true. Or you get to go to Grief and Rebirth podcast and listen to the medium's interview. And you say, "Oh, she's for me. That sounds right to me. Wow, I like what she's got to say."
I tell everybody, do your due diligence before you go to a medium. Look at their reviews. Look at Better Business Bureau. Look at all the different things and see what people say. It's always smart to go to somebody who's done interviews, who explains how they work, or it's always good to go to a referral. My whole family just went to Gary Joseph. He's great reading. We have a good reading, we have a bulletin board in the family. So now my sister-in-law went, her niece went. So we spread the word. When we do have a good reading, we spread the word.
That's great to know. And This whole interview is basically about how mediumship helps a person to process their loss and heal. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Because this is all about healing. So I'm sure you see a lot of healing.
I do. I think that's the best thing that comes out. Relief, healing, hearing that last, you didn't have to be there. Um, that fight was stupid. Now I understand your point of view. Um, I'm okay with your husband now.
You get a lot of that too.
I forgive him. He's not such a jerk. You know, don't leave him. So is you get a lot of that kind of stuff or acknowledgement. I know you're going through a hard time right now. I know you need a knee replacement. Don't worry, I'll be with you there that day. Your child is going through a rough time. I want you to know I've got your back. I'm with your child. Do you know what I mean? Like just hearing or simple things like baby's on the way and I'm holding that baby before you get him. So
Oh,
just
that's
think
beautiful.
there's the most wonderful message when they say when you look at that baby, and they've said this to me, what they do is they show me eyes. They say, when you look at that baby, you're going to see my eyes on the other side. You're going to know that for that instant, we are one with our newest grandchild. So sometimes somebody has to hear that they know what's going on in their life, that they're going to be at that wedding or they're going to be at that graduation. They saw, I went at my, I had a toe problem. So I went to a foot doctor,
A podiatrist.
podiatrist, and she's looking at my toe and the middle. I said, did you graduate and you wore a yellow scarf? And she looks up at me and she goes, yes. And I said, who wasn't there that was important in your life that had passed? There was someone who wasn't there, and all of a sudden she started crying and she said, my aunt. And I said, was her name Marina? And she goes, yes. And I said, well, she wants you to know she wouldn't have missed that graduation for the world. So
What a
so
healing that is.
what
Wow.
a feeling that is. And it seems like just a small, it was an aunt and a niece, but yet she needed to hear that this very important person acknowledged her achievement.
That's marvelous. Why do you say that finding joy in life has to do with lowering expectations?
Okay. Well, we live in a gratuitous society. We have instant gratification. You know, we have things we order it on Amazon, it's delivered a few hours later. Our phones, our computers that are at our disposal, you want to know a piece of information, we Google it. You know, we have such high expectations, but there's still human error. And also with a reading, people have to understand you get what you get, like Fancy Nancy says, and you don't get upset. In other words, you may not hear from your father, but you're going to hear from whomever the medium can acknowledge and bring through. And maybe you need to hear that message, that maybe your father felt you weren't ready to hear what he had to say. I
In
mean,
your, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
you've gone to dozens of mediums, you've had mediums, and yet my reading with you was unique
Yes, it was.
because maybe could be a multiple of things. Maybe you weren't open to hearing what your father had to say. Maybe he finally found someone who could deliver the message the way he felt it could be
I
delivered.
think that had a lot to do with it. I mean, because I have been getting messages from different people for about, I'd say, about 3 months that you need to resolve this thing with your father. And all of a sudden, here I have a session with you, and he came through like gangbusters. And in this session, because you would say, I want to hear from Saul. You literally said to me, you probably don't remember, but Saul took a step aside and said, I'm letting you talk to your father. You have to talk to your father.
I actually do remember it because I can physically see Saul stepping to the side. He was that strong of a spirit that he was able to, and I felt him move to the side and say she doesn't want to hear from him, but she's going to hear.
Right.
And you were put in a situation for whatever the reason. I guess I was trusted enough to deliver that message in the way your father felt it would resolve the
Right.
problem.
And what
And
a blessing. It really was life changing for me.
it was like it was like a relief. It was like things fell away. And it was really interesting. Saul was a watchdog. He did not move from my side until you heard it from beginning to end. He was not going to, like, you were going to hear this whether you liked it or not.
Well, we have work to do. And it was like, Irene, this is another piece you've got to clear. Come on, honey. You know, that's so true. Let me ask you about you and joy in your life. Now that you've gone through so much, David has transitioned, he's with you and all. Do you find joy in your life? What would you like to say about that?
I always find joy in everything. I always did find joy, even when I was sad. It's kind of like I don't impose my unhappiness on other people. My children know me well enough to know my face, but I always put up a brave front, and I go to the parties. I don't say no.
Right, but aside from the brave front, do you actually? But you do feel joy now.
I do enjoy, and I know that he wants me to enjoy. I am an editor of my own time, though. I won't waste it on things that I don't like to do. I'm not going to do what I don't want to do anymore. I try to put myself, maybe it's called avoiding the triggers, but I try to put myself in situations where I will have a good result. But yes, I do have joy. I read a good book. I watch TV. My grandchildren, my daughter-in-laws they're delicious. They're so delightful. My sons, my brothers, I have a great niece. I have another great coming, a niece or a nephew are waiting. So there's just beautiful things happening. I see my friends. I have friends now that I really saw who was my friend.
And your friends also change when you go through these things.
Absolutely.
Your friends, all those relationships really do change.
Yes.
Phil, right? Phyllis, I can say from personal experience that your impressive gift for mediumship fills people with love, solace, and healing, as you so beautifully validate the many ways their departed loved ones are still engaged in their lives here on earth. I want to thank you from my heart for this enlightening, insightful, and loving interview that has conveyed the impressive healing, comfort, and closure mediumship so beautifully provides to the grieving. And here's a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. As I like to say, to be continued. Thank you from my heart, Phyllis. Many blessings, everyone. And bye for now.